Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so glad to have you all here for our first Yulio live session of 2025. My name is Regiane Laveli. I'm a civil engineer and have worked many years as a structural engineer, which has given me a good insight into the design processes involved in architecture projects. Today at Yulio, my role is to help architects and designers to embrace the power of VR in their workflows and put client inside their ideas. I have with me today the Chief Product Officer and Yulio's co-founder, Ian Hall. Ian has built his career helping businesses take advantage of disruptive emerging technologies. He was an early innovator in cloud-based imaging. He led product strategy for a startup, later acquired by Adobe. Now he brings his decades of engineering and human-centric design experience to Yulio, running the product strategy and development teams. Ian, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Regina. I'm excited to be here. I got to say that the business side of VR, I don't think gets the attention that it deserves because it's such a kind of a technically intense area. And honestly, that whole kind of business and business use case is one of my favorite topics. So I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, brilliant, Ian. It's a pleasure to have you here today. So, I would like then to start by giving some context, right? Our conversation, as you said, is going to be about how VR fits into the business of architecture and design. So, according to some recent research and surveys on the architecture and technology markets, some points really caught my attention. First one is that the demand for architecture services is expected to grow dramatically by 2033. Second, client expectations are rising. Then, the pace of technology is accelerating. Not long ago, I remember when high quality renderings used to be a premium service. Now they are becoming table stakes. Now we have BIM, virtual worlds, we have AI. And finally, competition is fierce. So take advantage of the latest tech is essential for practices to stand out. So, taking all these aspects into account, my first question for you is, where does VR fit into this landscape?
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of business forces hitting architecture right now. All right, so a bit of background just for anybody not familiar with Yulio. So we founded Yulio it's about 7 years ago now, really around one simple truth, and that is we are visual creatures, and visual immersion is just an incredibly effective way to communicate complex ideas. So we really built Yulio to help businesses take advantage of this fundamental fact to help them help their clients make better, faster decisions. So it kind of speaks to what you were talking about in terms of what you do every day, which is help people kind of bridge that. So back to your
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
There are a lot of changes happening in the architectural world. So, you mentioned the growing demand for architectural services, which of course is great for our industry. That growth by 2033 is really exciting. Um, but there's also, along with that, this growing expectation among clients for things like better visualizations. So I think I know the study, at least one of the papers you're talking about, which is an architecture survey that came out relatively recently.
Yes,
So
it is.
that's one, right. Okay. So among other things, they did point out clients are asking for more. They're asking for more and better photorealistic renderings. And the survey also did mention VR and AR. They're growing, obviously, at a smaller scale so far, but we're way earlier on the adoption curve, so there's no surprises there. So there's
Mhm.
some really important insights, I think, in that paper. But I think it does miss a key point a little bit. So let's put it in the perspective of the client. So most of our clients, most non-designers have an incredibly hard time accurately feeling what it's like to be in a space if they are looking at floor plans, elevations, a set of renderings. No matter how numerous or how photorealistic those renderings are, they can never make that leap to fully understand what it's like to be in that space. So we're basically asking these clients to make very expensive, very impactful decisions on an imperfect understanding of the eventual results of those decisions. So, you know, that is one of the challenges of architecture, right? You've got this picture in your head, you got to convey it to your customer. So I don't think clients are asking for specific technology. That's not really their role. It's our role to provide, more specifically, the architect's role to provide information in such a way that they can understand it and they can feel like they're making informed decisions. So,
Sure.
you know, one of the challenges I think we've run into is everybody's seen a Marvel movie. Everybody knows what you can do with computer generative visualization. It's possible to create full realistic worlds. So, you know, they see high realism rendering and they recognize that it's easier to understand that than floor plans and elevations. The thing is that creates a tension. So we have a tension between the client that wants to feel comfortable and a architect who wants to be able to afford to deliver that. And
True.
architects aren't movie studios, right? They don't have the time or the budget to create these perfect visualizations. So there's always these compromises. So, you know, more and higher fidelity visualizations do help, but there is a diminishing return. So all the traditional really high quality renderings in the world don't fundamentally solve that client's root problem. There are more visceral visual communication mediums like VR that start to come into play. Um, you know, let me just go into maybe an anecdote to help ground this a little bit. So we had a customer a few years back. They were doing this large museum project. It's like $100 million project. They were about a year into it, and the internal team had been using VR to share ideas amongst themselves. So even, you know, even experts can use, you know, that full immersion. So they've been using this internally very successfully. And finally, one of the client contact leads decided to take the headset and take it out to the next client meeting. So they put the client into this is the first time the client had actually seen the design in virtual reality. They put the client in there more as a, hey, what do you think about this? And the client sat there for a few minutes and came out, and there was just one of those gobsmacked aha moments where
Yeah.
he said, that was incredible. And then he admitted that for most of the course of this year that he had been obviously making decisions based on the information presented, but a lot of the time he didn't fully understand what he was deciding on. There was a
There
gap.
you
Let's get
go.
back to that point. So this is the real world embodiment of that. Like he was putting a lot of faith in the architect, which of course always happens, but he would
Yeah.
have feel a lot more comfortable if he understood it more. And this was a breakthrough for him. So he actually asked the architects to put together VR scenes for the key contributors in the museum project so they could see what their workstations would look like so that they could get more accurate feedback. They had never done that before. That's how impactful it was. It just
There
changed
you
the way
go.
that they were interacting. So again, I think all the traditional high quality renders in the world wouldn't have had that impact.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. And Ian, if VR is so good and give you that kind of impact, on the process, why isn't everyone using it?
That's a good question. So, I mean, the short answer is savvy firms are using it. So, you know, we've had early adopters from almost the day we launched in the architecture world that were using it then and are using it now, and the growth has continued to extend. So, the long answer is a little bit more around the adoption curve. So,
Hmm.
along the adoption curve, you go through trough of disillusionment and all that kind of thing. So a lot of firms, in fact, there's very few companies we talk to today that have not at least dabbled in VR. And a lot of them have had, I will say politely, mixed results. So if they're really early in the adoption curve, some of them have had that aha moment. Some of them didn't have the infrastructure to be able to do it properly. Some had bad implementation experiences, and it just kind of got parked. And they're now dabbling back into it again, hoping that things have gotten a lot better. And the reality is the tools back then, and I'm not talking like back in the depths of time, I'm talking a few years ago. Heck, even a lot of the
Right.
tools that are available out there today, frankly,
Hmm.
they're not really optimized to work the way that architects work. They behave more like video games than they do business tools. So,
Right.
you know, if you
Hmm.
grab a client, you stick them into one of these things and they start zooming around your beautifully crafted space like they're fighting a level in Fortnite, you know, they end up face planting into a virtual wall. Some people on the call, I'm sure, have experienced this. That is not a great experience for anybody. It's not
Of
a great
course.
experience for you. It's not a great experience for them. And we do actually hear this pretty regularly. A lot of the tools that are out there right now purporting to be great VR experiences are these cartoony, gamey things, which are really not
Hmm.
working the way architects work. So ideally, what you want is from VR is a tool. It wraps the client in the experience. It's a client first experience. They never feel out of control. They never feel lost. They always feel informed and they always feel guided. VR can be very
Hmm.
isolating. You need to make sure you overcome these problems. And you know, architects at the end of the day are storytellers and control freaks. So an architect always has to be in control of the narrative. and a good VR solution allows them to control that narrative. So I guess what I'm saying is they're not all VR. I'm not going to get into the details. There's lots of VR interaction modalities and rendering strategy and all that kind of stuff. This isn't
Yeah.
a technical call, but suffice to say, all VR is not created equal. And I think this has left an impression with a lot of people that VR is hard, and that's just
Hmm.
not true the way it used to be true.
Yeah.
I guess back to the adoption curve side of things. Like, so the architectural industry, for better or worse, has been and continues to be a relatively conservative market, right? It takes a while to adopt. So you've already
Yeah.
had these massive ground shifts within, a generation of architects. You went from paper and pencil to BIM, network services, GPUs going, through the roof, all these
Hmm.
technology budgets getting stretched. This is relatively new and disruptive and hard to adapt to, right? So, people are kind of still kind of consuming that. So imagine that you're a leader and you are faced with kind of where do I put my money in terms of, investing in technology? Dollars to
Hmm.
donuts. If clients have said high quality rendering good, you're going to say more high quality rendering better, right? So you're gonna bet on the horse that you already know is kind of in the
Of
race.
course.
That
Yeah.
said, there's diminishing returns, right? Like at this point, it starts to drop off. You'll never break that fundamental problem that the client's got. So I want to
Hmm.
circle back to your question. So, adaptation is, I think it comes down to real world ROI, right? So you have to look at the two sides of that equation. On the return side of things, um, the returns can be incredibly dramatic. The example of the museum thing is case in point. But like just through a scenario, you're a mid-sized firm, you use VR, and let's say that you eliminate just one single iteration. So you're in your design development stage,
Hmm.
medium-sized project. What is it worth if you can eliminate one design solution? So what I mean by that is imagine that you go to a customer, you've got the concept, you collect their feedback, you integrate it, you move on to the next step. But somewhere along the way in there, the client's imperfect understanding of the trade-offs you were asking for them to make, it gets
Hmm.
missed. And you end up having to go back and reiterate. You have to do one more full iteration. Labor costs, machine
Yeah.
time, lost opportunity costs, a less than pleased customer. It's pretty easy to actually put a dollar figure on that. And I will bet you dollars to donuts that it will wildly exceed the cost of rolling out a VR solution to address that in the first place. So the value is there. I mean, that's kind of the hard value. You've also got the soft value. Like, what's it worth to have, to stand out from your competition? What's it worth for that customer to feel empowered? Like that museum client I was talking about. What is it worth?
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
they're going to be easier to work with, right? They're going
True.
to feel smarter. And at the end of the day, they're probably going to say nice things about you. And we all know what
Yeah.
word of mouth is worth in the industry.
Yeah. I see your point. What about Ian, the cost side of implementing VR?
Um, yeah, so I am saying VR has certainly gotten a lot easier, but there's obviously still fixed and variable costs. On the fixed side, hardware, you've got hardware, software, training, process integration. So they all still exist, but they have come down exponentially from where they were just 5, 6 years ago. So, start with
Hmm.
the hardware side of things. Like hardware has probably been one of the fastest evolving, and it's just been mind-boggling how quickly it's changed. So we in the business world are by far the biggest winners of the race to capitalize on the consumer opportunity for wearables. So,
Hmm.
I'm talking about kind of XR and having, a XR capability in your next set of Ray-Bans. Like that is, yeah, that is coming. And there are untold billions of dollars from Meta and Google and Apple and all of the usual suspects to go and make that happen. It's not there
Hmm.
yet. It's probably not going to happen, anytime soon. But the side effect of that has been the evolution of headsets has been incredible. So like headsets used to be prohibitive, and I'm sure some of the people on the call remember you had to go and like allocate a physical space on your floor for the thing. You needed a computer to run it. You needed an IT team on speed dial to manage the damn thing. It was a
Yeah.
lot of overhead. None of that's true anymore. So I mean, look at a Quest 3S, right? So this is a
Yeah.
sub $300 headset, $300. Like,
Yeah.
for a bit more, you can get a full three. That's 2000 by 2200 pixels per eye, inside out tracking, processing. I won't get into the nerdy side of things, but you're getting all of that capability in this self-contained package. Like, it's absolutely mind blowing. And we get to
Yeah.
benefit from that. So it's not just the hardware side. Like, obviously, the physical hardware side's key, but that's not the biggest breakthrough. Honestly, a lot of those billions went to improving usability. It used to be you had to have an IT degree to run these things, but because of this consumer centric focus, These things are so easy to use now. Anybody who can operate a cell phone can fire one up, manage it. Like you can give one of these to your clients with a little sign on it that says "plug me in and fire me up," and they'll be able to use this thing and within a very like this is no longer stressful. It That was
Yeah.
not true even 3 years ago. So when you
Yeah.
consider a seat of Revit is what 3 or 4 grand, you can get all the hardware and kind of all those hard costs you can get for a tiny fraction of that, and it's all in this kind
Yeah.
of self-contained package. Like this is a steal.
Yeah. You mentioned self-contained, what do you really mean
Mhm.
by that?
Yeah, so again, if you'll recall that previous generation, to power a headset, you pretty well had to have a companion computer that was doing the heavy lifting. In fact, a fair number of solutions available today still require that. You still have to kind of connect it up either wirelessly or through a cable to drive off
Hmm.
a headset. Um, and if you don't do that, if you use their standalone version, you end up with this kind of cartoony looking mess. Um, Solutions like Yulio, they're built to
Hmm.
take full advantage of the capabilities and constraints of this device. So uh, if you do it right, you can take that headset anywhere. It's completely self-contained. Your software runs on it.
Hmm.
There's no external dependencies. Like for example, I've pulled a Quest 3 out at a restaurant. I've handed it to a client and said, "Here, drop this on." I fire up my phone. I can literally see what they're seeing in real time. I can guide them. They're in there for 2 minutes. They see the idea. We're doing this in a restaurant. There is no
Oh,
like
that's
this,
brilliant. Yeah, I really like those serial
right?
stories,
Because it's as easy as me bringing out like a design and
Yeah.
showing it to them. It's like, hey, just drop this
Yeah.
on for a second. So that's what I mean by self-contained. It goes where you go.
Brilliant. And what if we don't have a headset here? What do we do?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question because obviously a headset is the best embodiment of this, but VR AR is not 100% about it. It's just more impactful if you can get in there. You can get probably a 70% of that experience
Hmm.
using kind of a decent proxy using a VR AR through browser-based technology. So again, I can't speak for everything out there, but Yulio was designed from the ground up to provide
Hmm.
identical features and functionality through the browser experience as the headset experience. So if for whatever reason you don't have access, your client doesn't have access to a headset, you can go onto the browser experience on their desktop or on their phone, whatever. They can be used completely interchangeably. So it's fully featured. It's just not as effective, right? Like ultimately, that headset
Yeah.
experience is what gives you that ultimate immersion.
Yeah, I do have customers that say to me, "Oh, I've already used VR. Can I show you can I share my screen with you?" And I say, "Of course you can." And then they show me this beautiful video, fly through, walk through, and
Right.
it's amazing. It's really nice. But is it really VR?
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, it kind of makes my earlier point. So clients
Yeah.
aren't necessarily asking for the technology. What they're asking for is anything that helps them understand the design better. And a well-structured video fly-through can absolutely do that. It's not
Yeah.
VR, but it is another
Mm-hmm.
form of kind of dynamic medium. Um, so, getting back to this, other dynamic visualization techniques. Um, are not necessarily competing with traditional visualization techniques, they're complementing them, right? So there's still always going to be a place for perspective, high quality renderings. There is a place for
Mm-hmm.
video. In fact, I mean, Yulio is interesting in that you can do static, stereoscopic, fully immersive scenes, but you can also do video scenes, so full stereoscopic immersive video. And we've had
Mm-hmm.
most of the major furniture manufacturers use Yulio as kind of part of their sales tool set. And some of the stuff that they've done in there is incredible. They've actually gone and created what they call reconfigs. So you have the building envelope is pretty much fixed. They're furniture companies, right? So the building envelope is fixed. And they want to demonstrate how this space could be used as a daycare center, as a medical lab, as a whatever. So as the client is sitting there in the headset, the
Mm-hmm.
furniture kind of zooms in and configures itself, and then it zooms back out again and configures itself in a different way. It is mind-blowingly powerful. I've been
No,
on the
can
receiving end
imagine.
of this, and I've seen clients, and it's absolutely so.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost kind of combining what you described your customer with the fly-through with VR
Yeah.
technology. You're kind of you have to be careful with that. Like you don't have people
Yeah.
flying because you get them nauseous, but that type of hybrid
Yeah.
approach is incredibly
Yeah.
powerful.
Oh, that's great to hear. Right, so we've covered the headset. What about the software itself?
Right. So on the software side, so pretty much every firm on the planet. is they already have a CAD and rendering pipeline in place that's capable of doing VR content. That again, that didn't used to be the case. It's absolutely the case now. So
Mhm.
mostly the tech, like the software side of things that they're missing is on the delivery side. So if you're already creating geometry and materials and lighting, to drive your traditional renderings, you pretty well have everything you need to create immersive VR scenes. It's stereoscopic, equirectangular, connected together with a bunch of glue that I'm not going to get into because this is not a technical conversation. But that part of it is actually incredibly easy. You've probably already got a team in place that can take what you're already doing and turn it into very compelling VR. Um,
Right.
so the VR creation side of things is not some big leap into the unknown. It's pretty well taking advantage of stuff that your team already knows how to do. It's more the delivery software side of things, and the price of that has come down and frankly normalized. Most of the players in the space are more or less in the same ballpark. Like we're what are we now, $600 per seat, which
Right.
gives you to this day it's still like I consider this incredible value. You're getting Revit plugin, SketchUp plugin, cloud rendering, a full stereoscopic,
Yeah.
immersive
Absolutely.
content, unlimited
Yeah.
client collaboration, again, all that stuff. You pretty well get everything you need for $600. Like the
Yeah.
value is, I think it's already there.
Yeah. That's great. But Ian, as I said, I come from the engineering side, and you do as well. And we know that it's not just the cost of the software, it's the cost of adopting the tool into the business, the new technology and the strategy. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely true. So when you look at the business integration side, you have to understand where VR can fit into your workflow. So we've got the benefit of 7 years of hindsight and very creative customers that have been honestly figuring out every single place in the architectural domain where VR and AR can deliver value. And you do have to kind of consider all of those value opportunities and start with the bid process. We've got
Hmm.
customers who send out headsets with every bid response. I love this. Somebody said, "Hey, why don't we just go like the headset's $300. We're going to preload
Yeah.
it with Yulio. We're going to put our portfolio work on there. We're going to do early ideation on the project we're bidding on, and we're going to put a little sticker on there that basically says fire me up." So imagine if you're the only bid where this headset is provided.
Hmm.
Which one do you think is going to get carried around the office and shown to
Oh,
everybody?
uh,
I think the competitors' bids are going to be sitting in their happy little binders on the desk while your thing gets touted around. Um,
true.
there's others like you think about the entire life cycle of a project. So from the earliest ideation stages, so you're in the spatial design phase, right? The last thing you want your client to focus on is the color of the wall. You just want them to tell you whether or not the stairway is wide enough. One decision. So you can use VR. So I think pretty much all the mainstream renderers, Yulio's got this capability as well. We call it neutral materials. Basically, what it does is it just does a simple ambient lighting model, turns off all this specific directional lighting, and it takes all the materials and turns them into this neutral cardboard appearance. So what it does, it is allows you to focus with your client on one thing. What's it like to be in the physicality of that space? All the other stuff goes
Hmm.
away, right? And
Yeah.
yes, you can do that, of course, with your traditional perspective render. But dropping the person in there and saying, does this hallway feel
Uh,
wide enough? Does this kitchenette kind of have the flow you were talking about? There is nothing because again, when you're dropping them into VR, it's millimeter accurate. It is real scale accurate if you've done this
exactly.
properly. So you can
Yeah.
get that kind of visceral reaction. Lighting design is a killer use case. So again, imagine that if I'm doing this lighting design and I kind of show a perspective rendering of this, if I drop the customer into that experience and they look
Hmm.
behind them and go, "This is beautiful. Oh wait, I was going to put some laptops there. I'm worried about glare." You would have heard that using traditional techniques. Dropping them in there, they
Of
start to
course.
see those types of nuances.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about AR. We're kind of focusing on VR, but let me 2 seconds on the AR side. So augmented reality, creating the digital thing and bringing it out into the real world and looking at it through a phone or through a mixed reality headset, incredibly powerful. And it does have a big place in architecture. So imagine that you've just designed this beautiful reception desk for a space and you
Hmm.
want your client. So yes, you can put it into a rendering, you put it into a VR rendering, but at the end of the day, you're putting it into a virtual space. Imagine if you could just go into Revit, tag it, have Yulio
Hmm.
deliver it as an AR asset, and the client gets a
Hmm.
little bing saying, "Hey, you can go and view this now on your phone." They drag it, and they literally go out to their lobby. They drag your newly crafted reception desk into the physical space, and they get to look at it in real
Yeah,
time
that's
in their
amazing.
space. Like
Yeah.
that is incredibly powerful stuff, etc. Like,
Yeah.
so there's a gazillion things here. So kind of back to your question. That's kind of the
Yeah.
workflow integration. The other big part of this course is training. So as I've
Hmm.
already said, the content creation side is frankly very easy. If your team is already using Revit to create the design, the geometry, lighting, materials, maybe they're using SketchUp, whatever on the CAD side, but they're
Hmm.
probably using a third-party renderer. They're using Enscape, Twinmotion, again, whatever. All the modern render engines more or less are capable of doing this sort of thing. Pretty much all of them can do VR compatible content. It's just an output option. So you can use Yulio's built-in cloud render to do stuff. You can use your rendering engine of choice. You have the complete creative control, whatever, it's up to you.
Yeah.
But either way, content creation, incredibly straightforward. And that's never really been the biggest challenge. It's on the delivery side of things. How do I get that newly crafted VR experience to my client in
Yeah.
a way that they can use it? So again, I'm not going to speak to everybody out there, but from our perspective, a client manager just has to drag that newly created VR project over to their
Mhm.
client's VR gallery. It's pushed to the client's
Mhm.
headset. It's faster than going and creating a PDF of your traditional render and emailing it.
Yeah. Pretty
And
quick.
so it works kind of the way that you work. And then,
Hmm.
from the client's perspective, they see that there's a new VR asset. They grab their headset or they do it on browser. They can either look at it themselves, or better yet, they hop on a live collaboration. So this is back to what I was talking about earlier. They put the headset on, you meet them in VR, and you walk them through the design. You collect their feedback in real time. And you
Yeah.
can do this from anywhere in the world. And I want to expand on that point because this gets missed. Probably this gets missed more than almost any other point when people are thinking about VR integration.
Yeah.
It's really important that you remember that the majority of interactions between an architect and their client over the lifetime of a project are done remotely, not in person. So roughly about 80% of interactions that lead to decisions happen
Yeah.
remotely. So if you've got a VR solution that requires this physicality, that means your customer has to come to you or you have to come to them, which means 80% of the
Hmm.
time you're not going to use the technology. You've just eliminated opportunity for 80% of your ROI. So
Yeah.
when you're thinking about VR, you really need to think about something that will absolutely work in person, but you also it needs to be able to work remotely. It needs to, yeah. So the way I say it is, VR should work the way you work. You shouldn't have to work the way VR works. Like it should comply with your workflow. So Yulio was designed to work equally well in person or remote. So you can literally
Hmm.
do this, like in their office, in your office, or you can be in multiple places, multiple people in multiple places. I think it's really key that you kind of keep that in mind. So yes, there are things to learn. Content creation, very simple. There's definitely, the client management person is going to have to understand a little bit, but this is not stuff. A competent client manager can learn everything that they need to know about this stuff in a few hours. In a day, they're done. That's not a big learning investment. Like honestly, really, the most efficient way you can really figure out that kind of overhead is do a pilot. I cannot
Mm.
recommend
That's
highly
a
enough.
that's a
Do a
good point.
structured pilot.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, that's very interesting. Maybe we could do a chat to dig into how to best to do this trial program, this
I like just kind of talk about
pilot program. Yeah,
how to
and then
structure
this
one, and yeah, I think
exactly. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah,
yeah. Let's see if people are
definitely.
interested. That would be a fun
Yeah,
conversation.
brilliant. Well, Ian, we are just about to end our conversation today. Any last thoughts you would like to share?
Um, Yeah, I guess expanding, and apologies to you and the team in advance, but if I can recommend one thing, I know it's going to sound a little bit odd, don't run out and sign up for a 30-day free trial, or worse yet, have your intern go and sign up for a 30-day free trial. And I say this tongue in cheek, but the odds are that your team are probably already up to your eyeballs. You're already overloaded. So imagine someone comes along and says, "Hey, go explore VR." What we have seen in the past is 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to sign up for a few 30-day trials. They'll get to them on day 29. Sometimes we'll get saying, "Hey, we didn't get to it. Can you turn our free trial back on?" Happens all the time. So then they
It
get this
does.
mad scramble and they don't give it the attention it deserves. Like you have to be systematic about this. So I recommend do your homework. So carve out some time for you and your team to look at this systematically. Model the
Hmm.
potential benefits. Again, just sit there and work out with your team. How much does it save us if we eliminate one iteration? So you've got to, in other words, you've got a higher, you kind of got a framework for what the return on investment could be. What is the time and savings, the net time savings, if we can eliminate one iteration? If we can keep an error from propagating all the way to down to the point where somebody's pouring concrete, what's that worth to us? If we catch one of those a year, what's that worth to us? If this technology
Yeah.
can help us do that, there's your justification. You want to think about the workflow integration that we were talking about earlier. And here's one thing I can't say highly enough. For heaven's sake, buy or borrow a Quest 3. Just get a headset. Like we have a lot of people, again, the browser experience is great. It's fully featured. It's not fully immersive VR. Headsets are cheap as chips. Your kid might have one. Somebody in your office might have one. If they don't have one, skip lunch for a day and go buy one of these things and have
Yeah.
it as part of your pilot program. The browser experience just doesn't fully capture that. You want to get that full immersion. And, ideally you want to make sure that you run this by clients. They should kind of experience this, and you need to see that aha moment. And the other thing I'd recommend is honestly get in touch. Like, so I know I'm kind of throwing this over to you, but so Regiane, I know you and your team are kind
Yeah.
of experts in helping people figure this sort of thing out. So if
Yeah.
anybody on this call has got questions around this, I encourage you reach out. Uh,
Exactly.
Regiane or the team can tackle it, and if there's questions, she can always elevate to me and the whole dev team if we get into any of the nerdy stuff. Honestly, give it a
Exactly.
try. You won't be disappointed. It's come such an incredibly long way in such a short period of time. I think we're kind of at that nadir where we're going to see VR and that adoption curve really start to take off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's been a great pleasure, Ian. Thank you very much for your insights. If you want to expand more on this subject, you can reach me, as Ian said, or reach my team. We are happy to help. We are here for that. We want to help you to go and set up a pilot program and make that work in your practice, right? If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. And I think that's it.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
thank you very much for
Thanks,
being
Jen.
here. Thank you all. Thanks, Ian.
All right,
See you
thanks everybody.
soon.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.